And so I guess I wonder from the time that you said he started it, where he wanted to help people on the ground, help hurricane victims, like do good in the world. Where did you see the change from him becoming like this late stage grifter? Like, did it start happening as he got more powerful? Like, to think that you should be the president of the United States is like quite a lofty thing, especially if you haven't been in politics. You're a TV show host, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I can run this giant nation of people, no problem.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I could run this big multi-million, $100 million, $200 million ministry in my sleep. I can run the country.
right,
I'll tell you exactly when the transition occurred. I'll tell you exactly the moment because I was sitting there. We were in the company car. I was in the shotgun seat. Pat was in the back seat, in the middle of the car. It was a Lincoln Town car. On his right side was a guy named Mark Nuttall, who was his campaign manager. On his left side was a guy named Rob Hartley, great guy. He was the vice president of development for CBN. He was the money guy. And you're too young probably to remember these old B movies about the hero who's got the in crisis. He's got the little devil and the little angel on his shoulders, and they're whispering, go with me, go with
right.
me.
I know the idea for sure.
Don't. Yeah. Okay. So he's got the politics guy on one side and the ministry guy on the other, and they're sitting there talking. And Nuttall tells him, he says, Pat, we got to get you got to give us the 3.5 million names on the CBN donor list, the mailing list. We need it for your campaign. There's a lot of money out there we could tap into because we're going broke.
Right.
Americans for Robertson was like destitute. So he's hitting up Pat, saying, give me the donor list and I'll get some more money for your campaign. Rob Hartley, the voice of sanity, the little angel, says, Pat, you can't do that. He says, we're a 401c3 or C4 tax exempt ministry. We can't get involved in politics. If we do, you run the risk of losing the tax exempt status, which is death to the
Right.
ministry. And he said, and Rob Hartley forecasted, he says, if you give him that list, donations are going to drop like a stone. And it went back and forth, and I'm sitting in the front seat listening to this, going, "Oh, we are at such a crisis point right now." And they went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and there was this awkward moment of silence for about seemed like an eternity. It was probably 30 seconds. And Pat turned to Rob Hartley and he said these devastating words. He said, "Give them the list."
Wow. Wow.
And I felt like it was gut punched. And I thought, we're dead. The ministry as we know it is dead. And sure enough, fast forward, Pat gave them the list. They used it for fundraising. Donations dropped off by over 40 some percent. And then after Super Tuesday, when Pat found out, came to realization that he was not going to be the candidate for the Republican Party, he came back to CBN. Money was so tight. Pat walked around, and I can verify this because Jim Small, my boss, who ran security at the time, was the bearer of the bad news. Pat walked around with a legal pad, would stop employees in the hallway, ask them, "What is your name? Where do you work? Who do you report to? And what do you do?" And he'd make notes. He'd go home that night. He'd go through the list and give his administrative assistant, Barbara Johnson, the list the next morning. She'd type it up, and these were the people that were going to be laid
Right.
off. And then Jim got the bad news, like the angel of death, got to walk around CBN and say, "You need to lay off these people." Over 600 employees
Wow.
who had faithfully worked on behalf of the ministry in all different levels and aspects lost their jobs because of that one decision.
Right. Well, it
And it was if God just went, "I'm going to pull my blessing from you," and I told Pat a couple of times throughout our time together, I said, "You know what? There's an old saying, you dance with the one that brought you to the dance, and you didn't get to where you are in politics. You got through here by ministry." And he just kind of sometimes would just look at me and shrug.